Okay, we're back. Welcome back to the web seminar. Now we're going to start talking about how to create objects on the screen, navigational objects. From the Home tab on the tab bar, toolbar, we have some buttons to create different objects, new route, new mark, range, bearing lines, and I'm going to start with the simplest object we could create, a new mark. I click on that button and the toolbar changes to say now click on the chart to create a mark or hit the cancel button to cancel that. And you notice the cursor has a plus sign next to it, so wherever I click the mouse it's going to drop a mark, so to speak. So maybe I want to put one right about here. Creates a mark. Got a name, new mark, got a position. Now something that pays to learn in Coastal Explorer is all these objects that we create here with the Home tab, all the objects, routes, marks, waypoints, range, bearing lines, and such, objects have properties. If you want to see information about the mark, such as its name, its location, its icon, those kind of things, those are considered the properties of this navigational object. That's what the Properties tab is for over here on the far right hand side. So if I click on this top icon, or the top tab, Properties, and then I click on the mark, and you notice the mark has a blue highlight around it, so it's the selected object on the screen. It's an object, it has properties. We look at the Properties panel, it shows us the name and the color of the icon that goes with it, its position, whether or not it has a range circle around it. According to this it does. No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because the display count's set to 0. I can change this and call this my first mark. There we go. So I've created a mark and I've changed one of its properties. I've changed its name. I can also change its icon if I want. There's a whole bunch of icons here. Maybe I'm going to change this and call this my dive spot, because I'm going to go diving there. Oh, that's not really where I wanted it to be. I really wanted it to be over here. I just click on it and drag it to where I want it to be. So you can move it around. Didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to move it. You can hit the undo button here in the upper left hand corner. Moves it back to where it was. If I hit undo again, it undoes whatever the last command, the previous command was, and that's an infinite undo. It remembers as many things as you've done since you started Coastal Explorer this time. Oh, I didn't really mean to change the name, the icon. I'll hit the redo it. There we go, that's what I want. I want that. And maybe I want it over here. You know, actually that's such an important mark, I don't want anybody to change it now that I've got it located exactly in the right spot. So I click the lock position button over here in the Properties task pane, because it changes one of the characteristics of the object, one of the properties. It's locked now. So now if somebody tries to click on this and move it, they can't. At least not without saying yes. So I could say no, we'll leave it that way. So objects have properties, and that's a really important thing. Now maybe that's my first mark, and what I really want to do is I want to put a circle around it so it's even easier to see. Over here in the Properties panel, instead of the general properties, I click on the range properties and I say I want a ring around it. And the radius of that ring is 1/4 mile. How thick is the line? I want it to be really thick. What color is it? I want it to be yellow. And I want to even fill it in. You can do all kinds of stuff with this object. You don't really want the circle to be that big. You want it to be smaller. I can just click on it. I'll have to unlock it to do that. I'll just click on it, and now I can drag it to whatever size I want it to be. And over here in the Properties panel, the radius of the circle changes to go with it. 1/3 nautical mile, 1/2 mile. Okay. Maybe I want another mark, so I'll click New Mark, put it over here. Over in the Properties panel, I say lost winch handle. If I ever get really bored, I might want to go diving and try to see if I can find that winch handle on the bottom over there. I know the bottom's very sandy there because I've been there, but may or may not find that. Okay. Now remember, objects have properties, so anytime you want to do something to an object, like say change its name, hide its name, I don't want anybody to know what that mark is. I don't want them finding my super valuable two-handed locking winch handle that wasn't locked when it got flipped overboard, so I'll just hide the name of that so nobody can see that if that's really that important. So those are marks. You can have as many of those marks as you want. Put them wherever you want, move them where you want, lock them if you want them to not be moved easily at least. Another object you can create is a range bearing line. A range bearing line is similar to a mark, except it's actually two marks. Maybe I want to know how far is it from the Shill Shoal breakwater right there. And you notice there's a plus sign next to the cursor, so where I click is the first end of the first object. And I want to go all the way across here to where it starts to get really shallow, like right there. And I click. I can zoom in so I can see this a little bit better. And you notice it says that that is about 1/10 of a nautical mile, a little over 1/10 of a nautical mile across. It's a range bearing line. Maybe I want to see from there to the buoy. Ooh, that's less than 1/10 of a nautical mile. Maybe I want to see from the end of the breakwater, so you can move either end of these things around. It's a range bearing line. How do I give it a name? I come over to the properties, and those range bearing lines don't get names by default, so I could give it a name. I could say breakwater to buoy, and there. I could lock it if I want, so now I can't change that range bearing line. Another object you can create, one that's actually kind of interesting, is a boundary circle. A boundary circle is, I put it somewhere, it's a circle with a ring around it. The significance of this ring is, however, that you can decide over here in the Properties panel on the right-hand side whether you want the inside or the outside of that boundary circle to be considered off limits. If I want the inside to be considered off limits, that's the default. And now, if my vessel were moving, and I'm just going to grab my vessel and move it by hand, and you notice it's leaving a track line behind it, that little blue line. But when the vessel crosses the boundary line, it sounds an alarm. We can turn off the alarm just by clicking on the yellow area at the top of the screen there. But a boundary circle is a special kind of mark with a boundary around it, and you can mark the inside or the outside of that boundary to be off limits. Some people like to think of it as using something like that as a anchor alarm. I could actually, maybe what I should do, let's say I've got the boat over here. So I'm just dragging the boat, and I want to create an anchor alarm on the boat. So I click let me do that again. So I click the Create Boundary Circle button. I get the plus sign next to the cursor. I'm going to put the cursor right on top of the boat and click once. We get a boundary circle, and we've crossed it because we are inside it. I'm going to silence that by clicking in the yellow at the top of the screen here. And now for this boundary circle, I'm going to change it from inside to outside. Now that's kind of a big boundary circle actually. If I click on the boundary circle itself, it says that's a 1/4 mile. That'd be an awful lot of anchor chain. I don't have that much, so I'm going to drag this down. As a matter of fact, I happen to know that when I anchor there, I put out 100 feet of chain, which really means the maximum scope swinging circle I might have is 200 feet. So over in the Properties panel, I click on the range, and this time instead of being 8/10 of a nautical mile, I'm just going to type 100 space FT for feet. That looks better. So that's about my range. Now if I zoom in on that, if the vessel happens to swing on the chain, and oops, I just moved the wrong thing. Let me undo that. There. So what I need to do is over here on my boundary circle, I need to lock the position of my boundary circle. So I lock the position of the boundary circle. Now I'm going to grab the boat, and you notice there's a highlight blue around the boat. As the boat drifts around inside the anchor circle, nothing happens, but when the boat crosses the boundary circle, it sets off the alarm. Only thing to consider when you're using Coastal Explorer boundary circles as boundary alarms is the computer has to stay on all night. It won't wake the computer up when it crosses that. The computer has to be awake for it to figure that out. So that's something to figure in to your power consumption if that's something you're interested in. Okay. Now another thing you could use boundary circles for would be something like, let's say you want to mark something that you have had trouble with in the past. Like maybe there's a buoy right here off of West Point, and actually a lot of people cut inside the buoy at West Point when they're making the passage from one side to the other. I've done it myself. But maybe what I want to do is I want to put a boundary circle over here, not quite that big, a little smaller than that, where the inside is the off-limits area, and I'm going to do something else with it. In the range setting here, I'm going to fill that. Now what that's going to do is when I'm out sailing around or boating around, it's going to put this big circle on the screen, which is going to be pretty hard to miss for me, and I can actually tell my crew, if they're steering the boat, hey, stay outside that circle. And I don't know, it's just easy to keep an eye on. If they cross the boundary, it sets off the alarm, so I'll know that, oh, we're someplace we're not supposed to be. You know, no, maybe that's not such a hot thing. Maybe I want to delete that because I want to use something else. That's such a funny shaped area there where the water's so shallow. I'm going to hit the delete key. Since that's the most recent thing I've created, if I hit the delete key, he says it goes away. Let's click on it. There we go. He clicked on the object and then hit the delete key on the keyboard and the object went away. Because what I want to do is I want to create a slightly different object. I want to create a boundary area. Instead of a boundary circle, a boundary area. So I click the boundary line control, and now I can create a boundary of whatever particular shape I want it to be. Put as many waypoints in there as I want, because this is an area where lots of boats go aground there. Now since this has lots of points, and it thinks I'm going to put the next point in someplace, how do I tell it that I'm done? Well, if I look up in the upper right hand corner, it says click on the chart to add points to your boundary, and then there's a done button. So if I want to tell it I'm done, I just move up there and click the done button. Stop adding points. You notice in that little tip that pops up, the stop adding points, it says escape. You could hit the escape key as well. That would do the same thing. But I'm going to click done. So now we have a boundary area. You notice that boundary area line, it's red and it's highlighted in blue, which means it is the selected object on the screen. So over here in the Properties panel, you notice it says it's red. We could give it a name. West Point Caution. And I can click this box to fill the area, and it fills it in like that automatically. I didn't have to actually close the polygon there. It automatically connects the last point to the first point. But now that's going to be really easy to see on the chart, even at different zoom scales. And click the alert button to say there's an alarm turned on, so when we cross that boundary, it sets off an alarm. So that's a boundary area as compared to a boundary circle. Similar concepts, slightly different shapes. You could use a boundary area to define fishing areas where you want to stay in or out of if you have coordinates. As a matter of fact, if you had specific coordinates of an area to stay out of, if I go back to this boundary area here, I zoom in on it, and I click on one of the data points, like that point right there, you notice it says that's point number 1 of this boundary area, and it has a position. If I click on the position information, it actually gives me an editable field, so I could actually change it if I knew, more details. Maybe it's really not 0.809, maybe it's 0.811. As soon as I enter that information and click outside of it, the waypoint moves a little bit. So if you ever create a waypoint or a point of some kind and you need very specific positions, you can edit their positions explicitly from the positions panel. Just click over here in position and type in what you want it to be. Okay. I want to go back to the boat quickly, so I'm going to hit the home key on my keyboard. There's the boat. Another nice thing to have, another object, is it doesn't have its own button just yet, but underneath the new button there's range bearing line and range bearing line from boat. This one's really handy, range bearing line from boat. If I click on that, it's going to create a range bearing line from the boat to wherever I click on the chart. So maybe I want to have a range bearing line to this mooring buoy that sits out here. So I click there, and I've got a range bearing line to it now. And what's going to happen as the boat moves, I'm going to put the boat in simulated motion here. The range bearing line updates to tell me what the range and bearing is to that buoy. And if I happen to be coming around and heading that way, I'll actually see that I'm on a decreasing range, but luckily the bearing isn't going to intersect. But I've actually used that to mark lines between myself and things out there that I didn't want to get too near, but I wanted to be really aware of where they were with respect to my boat as the boat moved. And again, as I zoom out where I might be for more navigation purposes, that just makes it a lot easier for me to see that, okay, no problem, that object is no big deal to me at this point. If I want to, now that I'm done with that object, if I want to get rid of it, I just click on it, and I could right click and it says delete the range bearing line, or just by having it clicked on, I can just hit the delete key on the keyboard and it goes away. Now all these objects that I'm creating right now, a range bearing line over here, a boundary area, a mark with a circle around it, another boundary area down here, all of these things go underneath the Marks tab if you wanted to see them, the Marks browser. So there's a couple of marks that I've made. Use this panel on the left hand side. There's a couple of boundary circles that I didn't give any names to. There's a range bearing line. There's the boundary area around West Point. And there's a bunch of waypoints because each one of those points is recorded. I should take that back. Those are coming from a route that I've created, which we'll get to in just a second here. But remember, all of these things are objects. So each one of these objects, if you click on it to highlight it, you can see that it's highlighted in blue there, have properties, and we can choose to adjust those properties should we want to or when we want to. Just remember, objects have properties. If you want to hide objects, one way to hide objects would be hide them because they're just cluttering up your screen right now. You don't really want to see them. In the Marks browser, if you uncheck them, they're hidden. They're not displayed on the chart. They're still in the browser, so you can bring them back whenever you want to, but they're just not displayed right this minute. We have that boundary circle, that one, and that one, and away they go. Coastal Explorer still knows they're there, and they're just not displayed on the screen right this instant. Bring them back simply by finding them in the browser and re-clicking the visible box there. So you can hide objects on the screen, because a lot of times you get a lot of objects and sometimes it clutters things up, and it's nice to just hide a bunch of them. Speaking of objects, we have a boat. The boat's an object. If I click on the boat icon, you notice boat is selected because it's its own special kind of object. In the object properties panel for the boat, we can control how big the boat icon is, small, medium, large. Just controls how easy it is to see on the chart what color it is. Lime green seems to be the standard color. What its current position is. I don't know why you'd want to lock the boat position. Do we want to see a line? If we have a wind sensor coming in, do we want a predictor line? The predictor line. If I put the boat in simulated motion, and the simulated motion is 5 knots by checking the instrument panel there. I go back to the boat properties, and you notice it says we have a predictor in front, which shows where the boat will be in 5 minutes. That's very handy. You can change that to different values. 10 minutes is longer, 3 minutes is shorter. But that's really handy to help see where you're going to be anytime soon. As the boat turns, the predictor line curves around, moves around, shows you where you're going to be in 5 minutes at your current heading and speed. You could put a circle around the boat if you wanted to. You can choose its radius, its pen width. Why am I not seeing it? That's an interesting point. Why is it not there? Is it hidden because it's blue on blue? Is it, oh, look at that, the circle, the range is so, no wonder my range helps to look at what I'm doing here. The range is so big, I couldn't see it. I didn't really want 6 circles. I wanted 1 circle at 200 feet, say. There we go. So now we have one circle around the boat at 200 feet. Well, let's make it bigger than that. Let's make it 500 feet. And also, this applies to any object. You can add notes to it, like this is my boat. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference with respect to the boat as an object, but if we look at some of our other objects, like the Marks browser, if we go to where I lost the winch handle, and we go to the notes, I can say Gary tossed it overboard by accident on Friday, something like that, but just allows you to keep notes on what's going on, and then it shows up in the browser. So again, it's a property of the object. Okay, the last navigational object we're going to create, and we're just going to go over it briefly, is creating a route. We'll cover routes in much more detail in a later section of the presentation, but for now we just want to introduce creating a route. So from the Home tab, I click the New Route button. You notice the cursor changes to have a plus sign next to it, so everywhere I click the mouse will drop a waypoint, and the difference with a route is each waypoint will be connected to the previous one, thus creating a route. So let's say I want to create a route to come out of my marina here, Shilshole Bay Marina. So I click to insert the first waypoint. There's waypoint number 1. I can even zoom in while I'm doing this to see a little better. There's waypoint number 2. Turn a corner, waypoint number 3. As the cursor gets close to the edge of the screen, it automatically scrolls. I'll go out past this buoy. I'll zoom out even farther, and I'll go a little bit more. And there we go. Now there's multiple ways to exit creating a route. I can simply double click on the last waypoint, the final waypoint I just clicked twice, and that tells it we're done. I could move the cursor up here to the Done button and click up there in the toolbar. And if you notice, the tooltip that pops up there says Escape at the end. So if I hit the Escape key, that's yet a third way to exit from route creation mode. As a matter of fact, that's my preferred way to do it. So I'm just going to hit the Escape key, and we're done creating a route. Now I want the boat back on the screen, so I'll hit the Home key. We get the boat back there, we see our route. Where'd that route go? It went into our Voyage Plan browser. The Voyage Plan browser contains voyage plans, which are routes, and if I click there, we see there's a route. Canal Entrance Light, Shilshole Bay to Shilshole Bay, Washington. Coast Explorer estimates a name for this route based on its first waypoint, its last waypoint. It tells me it's 1.59 nautical miles. Since we're looking at properties over here, we see properties. It's a route that doesn't have a name right this moment, so I could call it My First Route. And you notice as I was typing over in the properties window, the name changed in the browser window. Like I say, we're going to go into much more detail on routes in a later video, or a later section of the video. So for now, that's all we want to talk about. But so there we've created a navigational object. So we've created navigational objects. We've created a route, and it turns out I have some other routes in here from earlier. We've created marks. We've created boundary circles, range bearing lines, boundary areas. And something else we haven't talked about for a second, but I think this is kind of cool, is I'm out on the boat, right there, where I see it on the screen, and all of a sudden somebody says, oh look, we just saw a whale. How do I denote that in the program? The F5 key, if you just type the F5 key, the F5 key inserts what's called an event. It's another kind of navigational object. It's initially named with the date and time when it was created, and it will just stay there as the boat moves on, so we'll let the boat move on. But that event will stay there. I can find that event from the ship's log because it's an event. There it is. If I right click on it and say properties, over in the properties pane it shows up, and I could change the name. Saw big whale, something like that. But it's an easy way to just drop a mark wherever the boat is right now, and then later go back and give it a name and do anything else you want to it, change its properties. But an event, so that's another kind of navigational object. So we've created events. Our vessel has left tracks behind it as it's been moving around. We've created marks. We've got a voyage plan. Where does all this data go? All this data is stored in what's called a navigational object file, or a voyage plan document. Coast Explorer uses what's called a document-based file management system, and if you notice from the main menu in the upper left-hand corner, the first couple of commands in the main menu look very familiar. New, open, save, save as, recent. Those are all file commands that look very much like what you'd see in a word processor or a spreadsheet. And at this point, I could tell it that I want to save everything I've done right now so far. It wants, or save as, and I give it a name. And I could say this is May 22nd. And it inserts it, or saves it. So what I've just done is I've just created a navigational object file, a voyage plan document, which has all the information that we see that we've created right now. Our routes, our marks, our waypoints, our boundaries, all those things are now saved. Our tracks, the vessel tracks, are all saved in there as well. If I were to try to exit Coastal Explorer right now, this will be an interesting experiment. What will happen? It says, do you want to save the changes? Well, didn't I just save the changes a couple of minutes ago, and I haven't created any new marks or routes or anything, but the vessel is moving, so it's creating a track as it moves, and the track is new. I'm going to cancel this because I don't really want to get out of Coastal Explorer right now, but anytime you exit Coastal Explorer and you get this message about save changes, if you're not sure what it means, say yes, because that way it'll save all your navigational data or all your objects that you've created. We can open previous navigational object files, voyage plan files. We can save them as anything we want. And personally, I use a scheme where generally I will name my when I'm on a trip, I'll name my navigational object something relating to the date or time frame when it takes place. So August 2009, that was everything I did in August 2009, and I did quite a bit that summer. So there's a lot of data in there that's related to that particular trip. Okay. Okay, well that's it. So I'm going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll go on to the next topic.